This is Optimal Finance Daily, episode 1825, Life Without the Constraints of Time and Money by Craig Stevens of RetireBeforeDad.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. We're going to get right to it and continue optimizing your life. Life Without the Constraints of Time and Money by Craig Stevens of RetireBeforeDad.com. It's summer break for our kids. They don't have much to compare this summer to, but life is good. No school, no homework, no job, no workday calendar, no bills to pay. They had Lucky Charms cereal for dinner Saturday night. Parenting fail. The marshmallows are way bigger today than when we were young. Man, kids have it good these days. Last week, they had swim lessons and zoology camp. The rest of their time was spent at the pool, playing around the house in front of the TV or eating snacks. I'm envious. Mom manages their days like an office administrator. The kids just have to put on their shoes and stand still for sunblock. They don't even fight sunblock anymore because leaving the house usually means they're going somewhere awesome. The only real constraints on their lives are bedtime and the amount of sugar they're allowed to ingest. Walking far from home. Quitting my job to go backpacking the world for 14 months in my 20s was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I saw a lot of cool stuff and met interesting people every day. But one of the greatest benefits was the freedom from responsibility. I left the US without anything tying me down. The few material possessions I owned stayed at my parents' house. There was no rental property yet, no girlfriend, no kids, no debts, no life complications. My expenses rarely exceeded $20 per day. With a few $1,000s in the bank, I was free to travel without the constraints of time and money. Early in our trip, my travel partner and I rented motorbikes and explored the city and outskirts of a town called Hue in Vietnam. We rode helmetless, as was the norm, cruising the beautiful landscape, stopping at the occasional historic tomb or palace. At one such palace pit stop, we returned to our motorbikes and found them adorned with lotus flowers. Two giggling little girls hid behind some bushes and ran off when we tried to thank them. We rented motorbikes in other cities in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. It was so much fun to explore that way. I was in good company. We had no destination and nowhere to be. We just drove wherever the road took us, wind in our hair, oblivious to how dumb it was to ride without a helmet. I had all the time and money I needed to do exactly what I wanted to do every single day. I never felt so free in my life. That's the feeling I want to recreate in retirement, not just while traveling, but every day. Sunset soon forgotten. After the final leg of my trip was over towards the end of 2002, I was broke and living with my parents for about 7 months. When I finally landed a job, I started taking on grown-up responsibilities. I moved to a different city, bought a car with debt, and signed a lease to rent a room for $750 a month. A few years later, I bought a condo and got real. My monthly housing payment jumped to more than $2,300. I made enough money to cover the payment, but very little, if anything, was left over to invest. I started to feel the weight of my decision just a few nights after closing. The payment was too big. I was lonely and unhappy living by myself. It was the fall of 2006. Alone each night, I listened to an album called The Creek Drank the Cradle by Iron and Wine in the darkness of my dwelling over and over again. I didn't own any lamps yet. The album is quiet and melancholy, but it's beautiful and uplifting at times too. I couldn't stop listening. Traveling long-term again was out of the question now that I was a homeowner. Work was no longer optional, a factor I didn't consider before buying. Soon came the real estate crisis, then the banking crisis, and suddenly I was underwater and the value of my home was down $50,000. In just 4 years, I went from being completely careless and free to being trapped by the weight of what was supposed to be part of the American dream. I've never felt more constricted. Promising light. Buying a condo felt like the right move at the time. I missed the previous 15 years of steep real estate appreciation, and I didn't want to miss out on the next 15. The room I was renting was in a house with 2 other guys. Becoming a homeowner would make me feel like a more serious person, I thought. Getting my own place was a step up the maturity ladder. I was 31 years old and single. I thought a condo might help my dating life too. Right or wrong, I don't know. That was a factor in my decision to buy the condo. Unfortunately, I gave up a lot of freedoms when I bought my place. My cash flow was gone. The goal I set to change careers to become a financial advisor was dead too. I couldn't afford a career change. But I justified the purchase because it was supposed to be the next step in life. The plan was to travel the world, get a job, buy a home, settle down with a partner, raise a family, then retire and travel the world again. While living in that condo, I met my future wife through a friend who worked at a nearby restaurant. We dated. She moved in. We married. This financial mistake became the place where we began our lives together. If I hadn't bought the condo when I did, I never would have met Mrs. Retire Before Dad, and we wouldn't have the life we share today with our kids. Upward over the mountain. When I bought the condo, I still had 1 foot planted in the past. I wasn't ready to be an owner. I tell potential homebuyers to be sure you're ready. Most first-time homebuyers barely know what they're getting into. Today, I'm much more grounded in the present. Being a family man in the suburbs is exactly where I want to be. But we have a mountain to climb before we can be free to live without the constraints of time and money. Sharing your life with someone else, starting a family together, and raising children requires sacrifices. We've chosen to give our kids a childhood similar to those that our parents gave to us. A home in the suburbs, good schools, a safe and friendly community, summers playing at the pool, vacations at the beach, and a non-working parent to enable all the fun. We chose this lifestyle knowing its costs and constraints. Plenty more days of exploring the unusual are still ahead, both as a family and as empty nesters. But we're willing to wait a few years while we maximize financial security by investing for retirement, building income streams, and saving for college. That's where we are today. In the meantime, this summer reminds me of one of mine as a kid, spending entire days at the pool with friends, playing release at night in the neighborhood, and having very few responsibilities. Our only limitations were the creativity of our play and the calendar days left before the start of the school year. Now I get to watch my children experience it too, over and over again. You just listened to the post titled Life Without the Constraints of Time and Money by Craig Stevens of RetireBeforeDad.com. I like to think that life offers a buffet of potential experiences, and at different times of our lives, we're invited to eat from different areas of the buffet. The experience of putting down work as we know it for longer than a weekend or typical vacation can be life-changing. If you can set yourself up financially to take a sabbatical or an extended period away from W-2 work, I highly recommend it. I experienced this when I walked the Camino, which is a 500-mile trek across northern Spain. I took 2 months off of work, and not only that, I made myself completely inaccessible during this time. Before this trip, I rarely took vacations. I would often have unused vacation time at the end of the year. And even when I did take a vacation, I would often work anyway so that I would have less email to dig out of when I got back. Walking the Camino was my first real experience of truly not working, and it was extremely eye-opening. Stepping away from work helped me see how much of my self-worth was tied to professional achievements. It helped me experience myself without any demands, and I discovered things about myself that I'm much better for. Putting down traditional work created space to decompress, space to reflect, and space to learn. Our culture tends to put work up on a pedestal and insinuates that if you're not hustling to achieve something, you must be lazy. This is common criticism for people who retire early, as if they aspire to sit down and do nothing. But giving yourself some space from work to experience something else just might lead to more fulfillment from work when you get back to it. And that should do it for today. Have a happy rest of your day, and I'll see you on the Thursday show tomorrow, where your optimal life awaits.